Hello, my name is Camilla.
Hello, I'm Rosa.
I'm Elise.
I'm Ezra.
Hi, my name is James, and our title of the discussion is State Power versus Federal Power. And our first question was, what happens when the states disagree with an issue in a national concern? And I was searched up, and I was looking on the internet, and I found an example of this when the states and federal laws collide on the marijuana legalization. So basically, the law, as we examined in the beginning, states. Hold on, I'm just reading my notes off this, but give me a second. Under the federal law, cannabis is still classified as a Schedule I substance under the Control Act substance. This means it's considered to have a high potential for dependency and no recognition for medical use. For context, other Scheduled I substances include heroin, LSD, and scheduled substance. They're all federal offenses. So that's where they collide. That's like where the laws kind of collide.
Wait, so federal said it's illegal, and state says it's legal. Some of them.
So in California, Oregon, California, Oregon, Washington. No, not Washington.
I know California.
It's all
And
considered
New York,
like bad.
it's legal to smoke weed, but not for people that work for the federal government.
Oh.
And then in other states, there's still have imposing laws for marijuana. But it started because of the Reagan administration with the war on drugs. And because his whole political campaign area, this is going based off of his campaign advisor's statements of you can't be openly racist or targeted towards a certain group of people because then people will catch on that you're being bigoted. So instead you make a certain propaganda towards a certain group of people, and then that's how you get your white vote. So they did that because they classified the people who smoked weed, who did LSD, as the hippies, people who were against war, which was not something that he was for, and then black people, which is how he get the Southern vote, because he was arresting a whole bunch of black people on possession of marijuana.
So it was kind of run because of racism into it.
Yeah, I was talking about with my mom this morning. His proposition for getting it banned is they took one article of study and then they just used that, and they banned it before anyone else could bring anything up.
So they made it into a state law now?
No, they made it into a federal law.
Oh, federal law?
Yeah.
Wait, so the federal law, doesn't it overturn the state law? If marijuana is illegal with the federal law, doesn't that overturn the state?
No, I don't think so. I think federal law is like the final thing.
No, that's what I said.
Wait, what?
Because, so marijuana is illegal to smoke, or is it not?
In the state of California, it's legal.
It's given to the states, so the states can decide.
But anyone who works for the federal government cannot use it.
That's federal?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's the federal offense. Yeah.
The thing that I researched about was more about what happens when state disagrees and how certain people want to deal with that emotion. And one of them was how there's a certain congresswoman named Marjorie Taylor Greene who believes that because of all, like when states disagree and they have like this huge concern and it keeps happening, she thinks that the states should have a divorce. And it's a clause in the Constitution where states could have a divorce.
What does that mean?
It means that they're no longer united. They're different parts of the...
So every state gets to make their own decision?
Yeah, it's like when Brexit happened. So this is when the UK left the European Union. So it means that they're no longer a part of the Union. They're just the UK.
Wow.
Oh, that's what... Okay.
So she wants specifically the southern states, because she's Congresswoman in Georgia, to divorce places like California and New York and stuff like that.
Why?
Because she doesn't want the liberal propaganda in her state, and she thinks that they have too much say.
And what is she like? What does she work as?
She's a congresswoman.
A congresswoman.
Yeah.
Does she have the power to do that?
No.
Okay.
She just says that it should be.
Like
have the power,
opinion. She can
yeah.
just be like, oh, I want this. So a lot of people are gonna vote.
And the
Oh,
majority
okay.
of the people who she collides with, so she's a part of the Republican Party, even say that what she said is wrong because it causes tension between the states, and it just causes more friction of you're the other, and it doesn't. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't. It separates the unity.
What would divorcing a state accomplish?
Make
Nothing.
one
Because Georgia relies. Well, a lot of places rely on a lot of states for a lot of different things, and the problem is Georgia would not be able to feed its people, get jobs, or anything like that without California.
Yeah.
Because California, specifically the Central Valley, specifically Fresno, makes 2/3 of the United States food.
Yeah.
So they would not be able to eat.
Yeah, so for real, like an apocalypse, this is the place to eat.
Yeah.
Got it.
So like a lot of agriculture is transported from like California.
Okay.
So what I searched was literally just the question, and I found that if there ends up being where states disagree and the issue is a national concern, the federal government will step in and make it so that the states, the state can't take any action.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically, so if they're disagreeing too much or they can't set themselves on a decision, it'll be passed down to the federal government, and then they'll take over and try to find a way to what action should be taken with something that's national concern, right? Because if they wait too long and the states are too busy arguing over it, it's just going to make it worse. So federal's like, okay, we'll step in. You guys are done.
Yeah.
And we'll
like
come
a moderator?
in. Yeah, basically moderating it, yeah.
Okay. So I don't think I understood the question. But for my research, I mentioned Roe v. Wade being overturned by Dobbs v. Jackson. Because I found this article that said women do not have the constitutional right to choose whether to terminate their pregnancies. And that was, like, the Constitution is federal, right? So
well, your Constitution is just the rule of your land.
Yeah. And that obviously Dobbs v. Jackson doesn't apply to every state, but I still feel like the federal law should have like stepped in, because there was a lot of tension between this, and like they could have, I feel like, done more.
Well, the problem is that you had Roe v. Wade, and that became a part of, that was the rule of the land. Women had bodily autonomy. They could get health care. They could seek an abortion in any state.
Yeah.
And
that was federal?
That was a federal ruling.
It was.
And then after that, there's been a certain part of a religious sector that decided that this was not only unconstitutional, but it discriminated against their faith. So since that period of time, they've been going around and doing all of like the anti-abortion stuff and all of that. And it specifically ramped up in 2020, 2021, where this religious movement took on new forms because some of them got elected into Congress. Some senators have that belief, have that opinion. And so they do this. They don't not only do this with the abortion laws, they do this with anti-gay legislation, anti-trans legislation, where they go around into certain states that they know have conservative majority, that they know have like traditionalist views, and they try to get state laws to get turned the way they want, to where they can bring it up into different courts and just keep causing all of this trouble until people are like, we can't do anything about it, and then it goes to federal. And because our last president put in 2 people who have a certain bias, who have stated this openly, have been put into the Supreme Court, they obviously are going to rule a certain way. And so there's conservative majority in the Supreme Court, and those are the people who made the decision.
Where is the people?
So
The people?
does the Supreme Court, is that federal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait.
So that,
Well,
that
it's
would,
a part of your judicial branch.
that would be an example of federal being like having too much.
Oh, so Trump was.
Yes, it was Trump. That was our last president.
Oh yeah, so Trump elect. What was her name? Oh, they look funny.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, he appointed 3.
Oh wait, wasn't that his vice? His vice president.
No, these are not people in the vice president. If you're a vice president, you can't be a part of the Supreme Court.
Losers.
But it brought up one of my other things that I thought of was how in the Supreme Court they're talking about debt forgiveness, national debt forgiveness, which was a part of Joe Biden's plan of trying to relieve the amount of debt college students accumulate.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of fights with different people in different states because there are some people who believe it gives an unfair advantage to others, and then there's people that are saying that it affects a large part of people and it prohibits them from being a part of society, and it prohibits economic growth because they have to continuously pay back this loan instead of paying back into communities and all of that. So they brought it up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is talking about it right now, and I think it goes into, it's more of our last question that it goes into, but it's like government overreaching. It's not government overreaching, but it's definitely they're abusing their power in this situation, because one of Trump's appointees, which is Neil M. Gorsuch, he, in his opening, or one of his opening statements, said people who have paid their loans, people who don't plan their lives around not seeking loans, and people who are not eligible for loans in the first place, and that's $500 billion is being diverted to one group of favored persons over others. So obviously he has bias and opinion when he's not supposed to, because it's not a part of his job. But he showed that openly in court in his ruling, and so it's an abuse of power because they already have a certain agenda and they're obviously talking about it. So obviously they're going to say no. And the people who are not in favor of it, pushing it to the Supreme Court, knowing that they're going to say no, is definitely an abuse of power.
Yeah. Now that if you go on the FAFSA website and you just click on it, it says student loan debt relief is blocked.
Yeah, there's a
So
there's
now-
a lot of change.
So now that this is all blocked too, so people who are already in the student loan debt relief program, everything's paused for them.
Yeah.
So they can't pay, and now it says if it's not resolved by June 30th, their payment will restart completely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it says payments will resume 60 days after that, and then it says we'll notify browsers before payments restart. And then it says payments will restart 60 days later.
Oh, okay.
Sucks.
So the one that I got an example, and it was the recent mass shooting in Monterey Park.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was a good example of like state versus federal. So since for a while now people have been asking for more control of like guns and stuff as a federal instead of just state, because there's been a lot of occasions in the past where a lot of like shooters, you could say, have gone to different states to buy guns that are illegal in their state.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that, that's how some of like the protests and all this stuff have been going on about like we want more control of guns, but we want the federal government to actually do something instead of like giving everything to the states.
Yeah, because your states can only do so much. As I was
Yeah.
telling you
Yeah.
yesterday.
People
And also
Yeah.
there was another one for it that it was like the same sex marriage,
Mhm.
which is there was a point where people were trying to get it into like just making it to like a state thing and not
Mhm.
into
Yeah.
a federal thing,
Yeah.
which would have like
They're
literally-
trying to reenact sodomy laws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Go
does
ahead.
that mean?
Continue.
Oh, okay. No, I think that's one of like two of the examples that I put on, but yeah.
Mm.
So our second question is, what makes a good society with state and federal power?
Okay, I'll go. I found this online on a New York Times post, and it was talking about what makes a good society in state and federal laws, and it said competing among governments usually leads to a better governance, like a better. Let me say that. But in choosing where people live and comparing public service taxes and people why they're attracted to towns and like how towns use their tax dollars, competing,
We can get back to you.
yeah,
Yeah.
delete
Do we-
that. Bro.
Do we pause?
It's okay. We can just continue. We can finish.
I think I need to
So-
delete this.
I specifically put that in my opinion, I think it's a good society when they're balanced, because I don't want my federal government to have too much power, because then it just defeats the whole purpose of having any control over your life, and I don't want the states to have too much power, because if they do, it's just going to be so separate and so divisive to which state you go
It's
to.
kind of gonna turn into like the divorcing.
Yeah,
Mm.
because certain states
part.
are going to go to the far right, and then other states are going to go to the far left. But
Yeah.
at the same time, no state can survive without the other, because there's always something that's given from the other state or provided by the other state that's needed in certain
Yeah.
states. So a balance between the two is better, because they both do things that are important, which keeps them in check from one not gaining power over the other.
Mm. What I wrote was kind of similar to that, but it was talking what I think a good society would look like is a society where the governments are competing, and because competing keeps the town's managers alert and prevents governments from exercising substantial monopoly power over residents. And what monopoly power is basically government's ability to influence the market prices. So that's their tax dollars, and all that goes into where people stay.
All I said was basically what Ezra was saying. I said that there needs to be a balance between the two principles for our society to be good. Federal power is there to implement laws for everyone, but there should be a restriction to them because it is applying to everyone. And state laws are good for implementing laws that are more specific towards the state, because if the states were separate, they wouldn't be functional. So each state is different. Each state needs to have their own needs. So if federal law was like the only thing there, they wouldn't be able to have their needs met because of another state, which is why they should have like a certain amount of power to like be able to cater towards their people.
Makes sense. We're on number 3 now.
It's number
going.
Oh,
Just like your last opinion.
Oh, I just said the same thing Ezra and Rosa said, and I just said that we need balance, but it also is hard to get since many of the laws that are given to the state prevents a lot of certain things from happening. So like gun control laws, where they give it to the state, well, it doesn't really matter that there's those laws put in place, and like when you can just go to a different state, get a gun, and then just come back to your state. And then the same thing with the abortion laws, where you could just go to a state that allows abortion and then just come back.
So there's like loopholes that
yeah,
Yeah.
you just run away from it.
would just not matter.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.